Welcome to the podcast series Talking Success, connecting the global FinTech community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be chatting with Ashok Hariharan, founder and CEO of IDfy. IDfy builds technology solutions to help companies accurately identify people, run background checks, conduct KYC, mitigate lending risks, and onboard associates. Hello! Good morning, how are you?
Good morning, Stacey. Great, doing great.
Good. How's your day been so far?
Good. It's pleasant here. So yeah.
Nice. We're heading into December. What does this time of year look like for you?
From a weather perspective, it's about 22, 23 degrees in Bombay. And usually from a business perspective, it's December, so it's a lot of holidays. So I think people are looking forward to that.
Okay, awesome. Well, before we dive any deeper, it'd be just great to learn more about your career journey, but then essentially what led you to build the business.
Maybe I'll go back to my childhood because
Perfect.
some of those elements actually join the dots kind of thing to get me where I am. We moved around quite a bit when I was young until maybe I was 25 odd. We moved around quite a bit. Brought up in India for the first 12 years across cities, and then went on to my parents moved to Curacao. It's off the coast of Venezuela, a small little Caribbean island. I had a great childhood. Couldn't have experienced something that different than what India was at that time. So a lot of it is about cultural assimilation and how different cultures sort of interact with each other, and that kind of got me my perspectives around how people behave, how to motivate people, and things like that. So those are some of the lessons I learned early in my childhood, and then went on to do my engineering from Penn State in the US. Came back to India in 2003, worked here for a couple of years. And went on to do my MBA, then moved to London, worked at BT in the strategy team there, and then came back to India to start my company, right? So the reason I'm saying joining the dots is a lot of what we are as people is actually what we experience from our childhood, from our adolescent years, as well as college, etc. And like coming from like something like a Curacao, where my graduating class was literally 18 people, to going to Penn State, which has 60,000 people, was a big change, right? And so being able to adapt became a pretty core to my philosophy, being able to deal with change and being able to deal with ambiguity. I think that's something which I learned the hard way, if you may. And so a lot of that sort of is around how we built IDfy as well, because we have dealt with a lot of change over the last 10 years in the way people interact, etc. In terms of IDfy itself, the idea behind IDfy was that virtual transactions are increasing. And you have to remember, this is 2011. A lot of what we see today didn't exist, right? Or it was early days for Uber, Ola in India, Airbnb. So a lot of what we take for granted today was not what we took for granted in 2011, right? But I did see a trend that virtual transactions will increase, and as virtual transactions increase, I kind of was looking for how do you deal with risk and fraud. And that's sort of how the genesis of IDfy came about, right? And that's sort of where we started to think about what does fraud mean, especially in a country like India. It's 1.3 billion people. There is lack of data. There are so many different cultures, so many different ways of doing things. And each of those lends itself to fraud in multiple different ways. So it was interesting to think about fraud in such a fundamental perspective in 2011.
Yeah, we chatted briefly about the stigma of fraud being highly prevalent in India. And you had some really interesting comments on that. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah. So I think fraud in India, it's pretty much like everywhere else. I would say there isn't. In fact, if you look at fraud, like let's say credit card fraud, etc., doesn't really exist in India, right? It's kind of I think sensationalization of couple of anecdotes, which is probably what leads the rest of the world to think that there's a lot of fraud in India, which is the same belief I came in here with, right? Fraud in India has a very different sense, in the sense that it's related to very kind of simplistic fraud rather than very complicated fraud. It's more around non-tech oriented fraud. There is hardly any fraud where tech is involved and people are hacking accounts, etc. It's mostly social engineering fraud, right? So that's sort of how India sort of behaves. Now, what does that mean is, does identity theft happen? It does, just like anywhere else. But it is not en masse like I would expect, like it happening in the Western world, where technology is used to defraud people, right? Here, technology isn't used. It's actually human driven, right?
Very, very interesting. Why do you think that stigma lies?
A lot of it is what sells, I guess. People
the
like
media,
to, I think,
Hollywood.
The media, and people like to, I do feel there is a sense of trying to sensationalize the fact that people who are different from us, probably you want to position that there is either fraud or there is these people behave differently, and these are things which I've seen while I was in the US as well, right? I remember when I moved in 1996 to the US, the question that was asked was, do you have elephants at home in India? Right? And I used to say that we do elephant pulling, and and because obviously elephants use too much air, so we can only use one elephant per household. So things like that, right? So there is this sense that
ignorance,
it is ignorance, one, and number two, you do sensationalize a bit, right? The story of snake charmers in India, these things are not real. Obviously, India has changed since then, and the perception of India has changed as well. But in 1996, it was a lot different than what it is today.
I also lived in the US, and I remember coming to visit back home to South Africa, and my family and we went on a safari. So there was a ton of like lions, as well, elephants, giraffes, and the safari was gorgeous. It had like giraffes, like you could see them out of your bathroom window. And I remember taking a picture and being like, oh, my pet Freddie outside my window saying hi. And social media went wild. They're like, you have such beautiful pets. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a joke. And the fact that people, like educated people, were feeding into this was hilarious. But I understand where you're coming from. I want to touch on your business and just how you've been able to cultivate such an amazing culture. And I know this is really important to you, and you made sure to protect it. Being able to make mistakes and celebrate mistakes is a massive theme. How do you encourage this and build this into the culture? And the reason I ask this is because I think many businesses want to implement this, but how?
So a lot of it starts with the org design, right? So one of the things that at IDfy that we have done really well is around decentralization of decisioning. So the way we structure the organization is there are individual pods which have complete freedom to decide what they want. They literally can, tell us to go F off in the sense that if I had an opinion and their opinion actually matters more than what you would call the hippos in the room. I think that's the term that people use these days, is the hippo in the room shouldn't be the guy deciding. Because the way I look at it is, we are, as leaders, we are far removed from reality at a lot of times, especially ground reality. So the people on the ground should be able to make decisions in a more holistic manner and with the freedom to make those decisions, right? Having said that, you also have to kind of make sure that they're not deviating from core strategies. So we do have guardrails that we put, saying that beyond these, you cannot go beyond these guardrails, but within the guardrails, everything is game, right? So that is one. As a structure, we do make decisioning more decentralized. Second, in terms of mistakes, is about how in our reviews and in our year-end appraisal cycles, we do ask about what is the amount of experimentation that a person did.
Okay.
And there is actually a whole almost 20%, 20 to 30%, depending on the team, of their appraisal cycle is actually on experimentation and being able to be. And experimentation means obviously being able to make those mistakes.
Yeah.
And what do these experiments mean is have you tried something new? Have you built new products? Have you looked at customer service in a different way? So we are looking at people making those decisions and moving forward. Now, what does that mean in terms of the way we react? Because obviously we can put structures around this, but then also around reaction from leadership, right? Around, if there's a mistake, how are we? Is there a reprimand? Do you reprimand a person, or do you say, "Hey, great job, make a mistake, let's move on, let's learn from it and take it on." So what we do is we have a lot of retrospectives, almost on the tech side we call it a sprint. Every sprint has a retrospective around what went wrong, what went right, what are the learnings we take from there. In fact, I would take an example of our CTO, who's just brilliant at this, right? What he does at the end of the year is every single person in his team has to write a 7-page note around what he has learned, what he has tried new, what are the new technologies they have learned, and that is used as for his appraisal, right? So I think on the technology side we've actually taken it almost 10x forward than other teams, but we are moving in that direction across teams. But our CTO is just amazing at how he looks at learning as the core of what his team does.
What we're seeing in the market right now is that candidates are really picky with where they want to work, and your culture is more important than ever. And we're seeing even businesses with like big names or businesses you'd think many people would want to work for, is that we all know and we hear through the grapevine what it's like to work there. And I think that you've done a really, really great job. I know that you've had like close to 100% retention rate within your first 2 years. How do you think that you achieve that? Because it's something that I know many businesses are struggling with.
Scott, could you design a video game?
I could make you a hypothetical one. If I took some random genres, mechanics, maybe blended them together and created a new hypothetical game.
Now that would make a great podcast.
Undoubtedly.
So what would you make? Something original and exciting? A Dark Souls city builder? A co-op roguelike?
Everything. All of that. We could use the Nemesis system and put it in a first-person shooter. And we could have a loot system with survival mechanics and motion controls. And maybe you could... I don't know, save a kingdom from some out-of-control toasters. What about party?
Catch the Gaming Blender on all your favourite podcast platforms.
Yeah, so I think the first thing, obviously, it goes back to what I said earlier, is decentralization of decisions. The more you empower people at the next layer, the more they are going to feel like they want to be in that company, right? We are obviously never going to be able to compete with the FANGs of the world in terms of salaries and stuff. But what we can compete on is how much freedom we give and how much they can grow within IDfy. So every year we actually measure what is the learning that our people go through, and we do talk to them about, hey, these are the gaps that we see. Here's what we want to see next year, right? So they do see that there is growth in the org. I think that is one. Second, I feel a lot of this is related to sharing wealth as well. Like for example, a lot of our second layer does have equity. A lot of the people at IDfy do have equity in the company, and we have apportioned a significant portion of our equity for ESOPs. I think a lot of companies get that wrong, especially startups where only the leadership team has significant amount of shares. So when a company goes public or gets bought out, rest of the org doesn't make enough, right? And I think here they do see that, hey, we will make a lot of money when this company does go IPO or gets bought out, right? And that's important, I feel. And the third one, I think, is just if you look back at your own days, if I ask you what is the best time of your life that you ever had, what would that be, Stacey?
The best time of my life in the business?
In life, like in general, from let's say, primary school, middle school, college.
I think university for sure. I was really privileged enough to travel a lot, and I loved it.
Exactly, right? Most people say university.
Yeah.
So what you want to also set up is a collegiate environment, which kind of seems like university. What did you get at university? You had this ability to kind of explore and find out about different kinds of people. Like there's diversity in a university, which is required. So what we are trying to do at IDfy is create that diversity, create a very similar environment of learning, environment of exploration, environment with experimentation, environment with diversity, and I think that is kind of core to IDfy philosophy. And a lot of our people stick around because they find it like college.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. I think that you see that there's certain, even if you look at the university or college landscape, is that there are certain universities people get attracted to, and they have, in essence, created a culture. So I see what you're saying. I think that's brilliant. I know that you also are very critical in your interview process and onboarding process. You screen quite heavily for culture. Again, I think that it's so tough. I think that people can fake answers. What have you done to be able to screen for culture?
I want to just step back to one more thing, maybe related to culture, which I think I want to just highlight. One of the things with the university also is shared memories, shared symbols, shared events, like shared things that you do together, right? If you look at shared, like a lot of what universities is, like if I went to Penn State, it was about football. We kind of came together for football. We came together for the knitting lion, the symbol of the lion. And we went to events together, and that made us closer, right? So some of what we are trying to do is also about building those memories, culture, shared stories, shared symbols. So these are things which we focus on as well. Now, going to the part about recruitment, we do spend a lot of time on recruiting a single person, right? For example, in today's world, a lot of companies just do a couple of interviews and then they make an offer. I think it's extremely difficult to judge a person's fit in a culture if you're not going to spend time spend time with them. What does that mean is more than one person has to interview, number one. People have to interview from across areas. So let's say there's a tech interview going on. We do have people from product interviewing the same person. We have people from marketing interviewing the same person. And that kind of gives two things that I feel it allows us to do. Is one is judge the person on the merit of whether he's a good fit to the culture. Second is it gives the person a great feeling for the company itself and what kind of people work in the company. I think it's super important, and I don't feel that in today's world, companies are doing justice by doing these remote interviews, video-based interviews. We do bring people in. We physically meet a person before we make an offer. Even if it is our job in let's say in Bangalore or Delhi, we do fly them into Bombay to meet the team.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And I think that's important. And they spend time in the office. They do walk around and get a sense of different teams. And that usually, with that kind of high touch model, obviously it's difficult to do mass interviews. So we selectively interview, obviously. And that means we just can't do 100 interviews, right? We would have to do only like 10, 15 interviews to get a person. But that's something which we focus on heavily.
Do you require everyone to come into the office every day of the week?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I've got a question for you. So we ran a talent workshop a couple of weeks ago, and there was this debate that occurred amongst the audience members. And it was just really interesting to hear everyone's different perspectives on whether remote working is better or coming into the office. And I think one of the big questions that was brought up was that you're missing out on a big talent pool of people that are brilliant, but really need that flexibility or for various different reasons, or maybe even just feel like they're more efficient at home. What is your opinion on that?
So let's maybe I'll go back 2 years. We had very similar thoughts as well, that like, let's give flexibility. And then when COVID happened, it was a great way to experiment with that, right? What we realized was collaboration suffers significantly. And learning from different people kind of suffers as well. Like if you think about college again, the best part of our college was to meet people every day. And I just feel like, human beings are not supposed to be behind screens and talking behind screens. Imagine if I have to fix something, I can just go tap a person's shoulder and say, hey, can you help me with this? But imagine now if you have to do that same thing online, you have to set up a meeting, you have to send a Slack message, the guy might look at it, might not look at it. It just seems very, very it creates a sense of distance, number one. Number two, there's no sense of belonging, I feel. Right? The whole aspect of how can you have a shared memory remotely? How can you have a shared story remotely? Right? That's one aspect of it. Second, I feel is something more related to younger folks, especially fresh out of college. There's a lot of learning that I had because I went to office and learned from my peers. Some of that learning is not about how do I code better. It is actually about how do I mingle? How do I work in social environments? And you develop as a human being over a period of time. I kind of feel you miss out on all of those pluses. And when you start to look at, hey, what is my deliverable? Because a deliverable, you might do a great job, but what about everything else? And that's sort of where we came from. And what we also realized is coming out of COVID, when we were back in the office, we were able to get far more work done, number one. And number two, our people at IDfy also kind of gave us feedback that mental health was far better when they came to office than when they were sitting at home. And I think that kind of makes sense also, right? Because when you're at home, where work ends and where home begins kind of gets intermingled, and you never step out of one to the other. It's kind of all over the place. So you don't have a way to switch off and switch on. In either place, right? And I feel maybe that's where it's coming from. I think the jury is out, like in the sense that I don't know the right answer to this, but it didn't work for us. Maybe there are companies who did it better than us, but it didn't work for us.
I don't think it's necessarily companies that did it better than you. Conclusion that was drawn from the conversation was that there are certain people that are going to be attracted to a business like yours, and they're going to be the right people for your business.
That's right.
And I think that you've got to test it out and see what works really well for you. I know that our company, we're all in the same country. We're in different cities. We meet every single quarter, go away for like a weekend to a week together. We all fly in a couple times a quarter. We spend a lot of time together. We know each other on a personal level. So I think there is a way for you to create culture while still having people be more flexible, working from home. Sometimes I think hybrid works really well. But I think at the end of the day, whatever is going to be the best for you, that's what you got to do.
Yeah, I think one of the things which we realized is because we work in a highly collaborative environment, in the sense that we are building completely new things. Let me step back a bit. Let's say there's an individual contributor role. I think it works beautifully if you're sitting at home, right? You'll get far more work done. But if you're collaborating and a lot of it is discussions around what to build, what kind of new stuff that we have to get out, then you have to kind of bring it to a single, like sort of bring everybody together and have that discussion. The answer might be in hybrid, right? And we do have people, they do work sometimes from work from home, but like we have not made it an official policy, but it happens at times, and we are flexible in the sense that, hey, if somebody has an emergency at home, work from home, it's fine.
Yeah.
But officially we are a work from office company.
Got you. The last question I have for you, and I think that this is just a really important one to go through. You never launch a product without finalizing the customer success journey. And it's not just about the front end, but really about the customer. And this is not the case for every business. Yeah. How did you do this? And what advice do you have for businesses that don't have this set?
So when we experimented with this as well, right? Most product companies will generally look at UI UX and then launch something in beta. We work in a enterprise. We are a large enterprise product, right? Like we sell to large enterprises. We have a harder time launching something and testing it out on live than let's say a Google does, right? Google can be on beta for 3 years and it doesn't matter because they get feedback. For us, we cannot launch something which is what I would call half-baked. So what we did, and I think it only worked, maybe it's very unique to us and maybe it's very unique to companies which work in similar spaces to us, is that when you launch a product, the way we look at it is we look at the customer experience end to end. What does that mean? It means we have a GTM plan done. We have the pricing plan done. We launch. We have the launch plan done. We do the marketing plan done. Then we look at the product, the UI UX. Obviously, that's usual. Then we also look at what is early life experience of the customer. We kind of design that. We design the support experience upfront, so that if things go wrong, what kind of responses do our people get? Wow. We actually go through the training process for everyone during launch, so that people who are frontline know exactly what they're selling. Number one, number two, exactly what they're supporting. So this is actually designed by our product team, right? Wow. All of this.
It's all designed by your product team.
Yeah, product team. So when we look at product, it's actually end-to-end customer experience, not just how the product looks and feels. So we do have customer success team within product. And we thought that's the right way to do this because product has that holistic view around how to launch.
So interesting.
Yeah, but this also goes back to decentralization decision. If you think about it, is that product lead for that particular product is handling everything, right? This is sort of how we are enabling the leaders to act like CEOs. So it's not like he has to worry. So when he launches, he doesn't have to work with a service and support team to say, hey, how are you? Yeah, hey, here's a product, and you guys have to design the support experience. He designs it. It's his responsibility, right?
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. A lot I'm thinking about, and a lot I want to just digest over. But thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Stacey. Great talking to you.
Where's the best place for listeners to reach you if they have any questions?
You can look up our LinkedIn profile. We do have a Facebook profile as well, but you can, if you want to email me, it's ashok@idfy.com.
Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent, expanding your team, or you yourself are looking for a new, exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.